Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our initial launch of our 8-parter. Episode 2 features 1995's Apollo 13. Tony, your initial thoughts on Apollo 13?
I thought this movie was excellent. Absolutely everything about it I loved. The direction is really strong. Tom Hanks obviously knocks it out of the park, but I mean, how could you really expect anything else from one of the greatest actors of all time? The cast is honestly excellent. There's not a bad performance to be found in this movie. It's an excellent movie.
And Tom Hanks, was kind of in the middle of his own sort of renaissance, like he was doing movies within a few years of that, movies like Castaway and Big and Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, and he was just really on a huge roll in the mid-90s, so really at the top of his game in June 30th, 1985, when Apollo 13 released. The movie was budgeted for only $52 million, a bit of a surprise for me, given sort of some of the effects in that film. And earned back $355 million.
Whew.
Obviously, one of the top earners of that year. It is directed by Richie Cunningham, not the original, from Happy Days, Ron Howard. But who doesn't see Richie Cunningham when you see him?
No, that's the only person he's ever going to be.
For those who are not familiar, Ron Howard is sort of the master of the biopic, obviously doing great work on films like Frost Nixon, Cinderella Man, and A Beautiful Mind. And he just does a masterful job of pulling this cast together and telling a story, the true story of the Apollo 13 mission.
Absolutely. The direction in this movie is incredibly strong, and I mean, once again, that's to be expected from Ron Howard. I haven't seen a movie of his at all that has even been close to bad, at least in the direction department. I would definitely have to say that the score for this movie was really good. It had a lot of leitmotifs and recurring themes in the film that popped up at just the right times and fit really perfectly. What did you think about the music?
The music is one of my favorites, honestly, from the 90s. It's by James Horner, and I think it's probably his best work, with the exception of 2 years later, Titanic. I could not get enough of the ending score. It played in the credits. The vocalization, the instruments in it, everything about it just sounds really, really, really amazing. And it's actually my highest scoring point for this film.
It's a tremendous score, and it really couldn't fit the pacing of the film and each scene perfectly. As far as the plot goes, I mean, it is a little hard to judge considering it's based on a true story. But as far as the pacing of the plot goes, and the scene direction, the writing, all of that was so strong. All the characters felt absolutely real, and the performances that were turned in were absolutely excellent. Everyone in the cast had an incredible chemistry, particularly the men who went out to space. They carried a lot of that movie on their backs because they were doing a lot of scenes in low gravity, and it was just those three carrying a lot of the weight of the movie, and they were excellent.
Oftentimes, pulling off a true story in a film is a lot harder than pulling off a fictional story, and you can see Ron Howard's dedication to bringing a true story to light. With the interest that he had in the research for this film and the project, and meeting the actual astronauts going to NASA. He actually directed a documentary years later entitled In the Shadow of the Moon, which I also highly recommend. And he really, really wanted to immerse the audience and what it really meant to be on this mission and be trapped in space like this. The actors spent time training with actual equipment and learning more than 500 buttons and switches, and training in weightlessness environments. So it's really great that Ron was able to kind of pull these guys together and say, hey, go through this, because we really want to make it as believable as possible on screen.
Absolutely. It was incredibly impressive, and I absolutely and completely bought all of them as real astronauts, from everything from the jargon that they were using to how they clearly seemed to understand what was going on with all of the buttons and things going on. It was very impressive, a very authentic feeling experience.
One of the most shaky things to me in film is space, because it can get really cheap looking really quickly, and to be working with that enclosed environment in the lunar module, they did a spectacular job of making it feel very believable and making you feel like you were in a dangerous situation along with those crewmen.
Oh, completely. There were so many tense scenes up in space when when the rocket explodes, and when they're starting to get cold, and when they don't know if they can make it around the moon, and all sorts of other scenes. It's an incredibly tense movie, and during these tense scenes, it also tends to cut back to the way the control room is reacting to the situations, the way the pilots' families are reacting to the situations, and it's a really smart and well done movie.
Absolutely. So the cast here, obviously an all-star cast. We have Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell. And, the real Lovell actually appears as the captain of the recovery ship at the end of the movie.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was a nice little Easter egg they threw in there. Kevin Bacon does a spectacular job as Jack Swigert, who was kind of thrown into this mission at the last second in real life. But Kevin Bacon's character really brings a real gravity to the three-man crew on the lunar module. I feel that his performance kind of anchored the entire situation.
Certainly, he turned in an excellent performance as kind of the new guy. Like, they knew him, but they weren't expecting to go out into space with him, and he turned in an excellent performance. And also, Bill Paxton was absolutely phenomenal in the movie, and as kind of the rough rebel kind of guy, and he conflicted with Jack Swigert a lot, Kevin Bacon, in the movie, which led to some tense scenes, but. Yeah, it was great.
Bill Paxton plays the astronaut Fred Haise, and also seen in Titanic, and also Vertical Limit, one of our other 8-part films here, if you haven't had a chance to check that out yet. And then Gary Sinise is another astronaut in the film, playing Ken Mattingly, who was unable to go for reasons you'll have to see the movie for, but he also plays a huge part in the film, and Gary Sinise did an amazing job with his role as well.
Certainly. He had to, basically, to keep this mostly spoiler-free, he obviously couldn't go to space, but he was on the ground helping them out and guiding them through getting back to Earth, and he really played that role strongly, considering a lot of it was just him by himself sort of talking into this microphone, but it was really well done.
Right, and then back at Mission Control, we have Ed Harris playing Gene Kranz, and in that documentary I was talking about, In the Shadow of the Moon, I promise you, they must have taken a time machine and gone back to the 70s and grabbed another Ed Harris lookalike. Ed Harris looks exactly like the Gene Kranz of the 90s, of the 70s Apollo 13 mission.
Oh man, that's impressive. It doesn't surprise me though. It's Ed Harris. You always see him playing these kinds of roles with the sort of hard-nosed guy with a flat top and generally like a military position or something like that. And I mean, he's kind of typecast in that role, but I think he still did a stellar job.
For sure. The movie was nominated for 9 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. It won for Best Film Editing and Best Sound, so obviously it was a well-respected movie by critics and the audiences alike. Clearly one of the best films of 1995. Honestly, one of the best films of the decade, in my opinion. What would you think?
I would absolutely agree with that. It's a phenomenal movie, and definitely the best of what we've watched for Relic so far, at least in my opinion. It's just an extremely quality film. Everything came together, and it worked so well.
Funny side story here. After a test preview for the film, there's a comment card read that the viewer had total disdain for the typical Hollywood ending that the movie provided. The viewer did not appreciate that the crew survived, saying that this would never have happened in real life, and and so it was a funny little piece of trivia there that I came across, but. Do your research before you.
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta go in knowing at least a little bit.
For sure. So, it's funny. We see these sort of themes playing out in film every few years. Like, for instance, for a few years you may see vampires be wildly popular, or the disaster movie be really popular for a few years. And Apollo 13 came out in a time in the mid to late 90s where the space movie was kind of the big thing. Movies like Contact or Armageddon, Deep Impact, or even Independence Day, if you want to lump that in there. And I think that this, obviously because it's a true story, helps it out, but I think it also blows those films away as far as just, immersing you into the situation and making you come out, rooting for these guys and rooting for this film that Ron Howard put together.
Absolutely. For personal taste, I honestly think Contact is a little better, or well, it's more my style, but I would say that Apollo 13 is the better movie. But either way, both of them, you can't argue with them. And, I mean, you gotta say that it's at the very least better than Armageddon.
Yeah, so Armageddon may come up on our Relic view.
I'm hoping so.
We'll get to that when we get to that. So, running down here, what was your final scores on it?
My final score was it was a 9 out of 10. I thought everything came together really well. The only real niggling part that I thought was the CGI for the launch has aged a little poorly, but that's about the only real fault I could find with it.
I give the film a 9.22, so that averages out to about a 9. I thought the plot was excellent. The music and the score is some of the best I've ever heard. One of James Horner's best film works. The cinematography, as I said, they did a really great job of making you feel as if you were in danger in space in the lunar module.
Certainly.
And acting and performance, they did a really great job of pulling you into that same mode. Kathleen Quinlan, who plays Marilyn Lovell, she does a great job on Earth of pulling you into that mode of saying, hey, my husband's going to get home. And Tom Hanks actually mentions in an interview later that this is part of the reason, possibly part of the reason this movie stands out, is because it is one of those great 7 stories of literature that you can tell, which is the story of coming home. How do you find your way home? And for this to happen, not 50 years ago in real life, and for Ron Howard to be able to put it on screen in this way was really spectacular. So our final Relic score on Apollo 13 is a solid 9 out of 10. So far, as of episode 2, of course, but so far this is the highest score Relic has given out. You'll have to join us for future episodes to see if we have other films that can beat this one out. We'd love to hear your comments and suggestions and what you think if Apollo 13 deserved this score. But for now, we'll be moving on to episode 3. Join us on over there. You don't have to wait for next week. It's about a little Scottish redheaded girl in the movie Brave. So we will be seeing you over there.
Thank you for joining us.